Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off, what a good story coming out of Pennsylvania. You may remember a couple of days ago, the story of a tanker truck crashed under a bridge on I-95 and basically lit it up and collapsed. And all of my friends in Philadelphia are freaking out because it's already hard enough to get up and down 95 or anywhere in Philadelphia. Now you're going to have this shutdown. You're going to have this massive, harm to our economy, honestly, because a huge portion of our economy goes up and down that road. So to have half of the highway shut down, that's going to be a problem. And as someone who drives a truck for a living, I've been in those things, and I think Bridgeport, Connecticut, it happened there, I guess it was 20-some years ago, but the governor, and this is, doing what the governor has to do. Emergency, get all the response you can there, do everything that you can possibly do with all the levers and all of the strings you can pull to get the resources you need and the money you need and the things expedited to get it done quickly. Democrats do a good job of that. But what they do a terrible job at, and I've been saying this for years, what they do a terrible job at is promoting the fact that they're doing their job. And if you remember when the bipartisan, a handful of Republicans coming along with all the Democrats, the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed through, I said the first thing that they've got to do is whenever one of these projects pops up, giant 20-foot billboard of Joe Biden going, I did that, to let people know this is your tax dollars at work. This is the administration doing its job. Good messaging, good PR, good all of that stuff. But more importantly, good governance. Citizens knowing this is how my tax dollars are being used. And the reason I bring all those things together is because the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, did all those things, got all the resources moving. There's demolition crews. There's work being done. But now they put up a live stream. And I love this idea, a 24/7 live stream that you can watch the I-95 being rebuilt. You can see the cranes and the tractors. You can see all the work happening in real time, anytime, day or night. And you will see that they're going to be out there anytime, day or night, to get this thing done and done right. And my mind is like, this is brilliant. Somebody should have thought of this a whole bunch of years ago. And the reason I bring this up, I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit here, because I've been saying for a very long time, Democrats need to do this kind of stuff. Obama tried with the American Rescue and Recovery Act, the ARA. There was a board that you drove in. This brought the... No, that's just a little tiny sign. You needed something big, something bold, something that people can see daily. Because here's the thing, that traffic cam, that live stream is going to be picked up by news stations all across this country. Hey, if nothing more, let's find out what they're doing on 95 in Philadelphia. Oh, they're working, they're rebuilding. Your tax dollars at work. Now, I've said over the past more than a decade, and I used to say this to my building trades friends, that they should have created an app where anytime you're going to drive near a structurally deficient bridge or a piece of our infrastructure that is failing, and there's a lot of it, that it just shoots you a text. Something cute, like call mom. You might not make it to the other side. Something light and cheery. But just to raise awareness of what our infrastructure is like. And I came up with that idea back in 2012, 11, 12. With the idea being that maybe with technology, we can engage people. Maybe that gets them to act. Maybe add a link to go, hey, call somebody to get something done, that kind of stuff. So I look at this thing with Shapiro, and this is great. Also today, the folks over at the Center for American Progress, they have come out with their tracker of all of the jobs that are being done because of the infrastructure bill. And it's all the geeky stuff. It's the job numbers, it's the project, it's all kinds of stuff that I think is fantastic. Now, I think they need to take all of this stuff, the live stream idea, all of the geeky stuff with the numbers and the job creation and the investments and all of that stuff, and put it together on something like, like one of the Waze apps or Google Maps or one of those things where as you're driving around, it's just popping up at you. Go, oh, hey, look, there's a Joe Biden did that. Look at those jobs that Joe Biden created. Look at that economic activity in our neighborhood. See, this is the kind of stuff that Republicans used to do really well. I mean, messaging-wise, Republicans used to be at the top of the game. They knew how to message, and they knew how to do it really, really, really well. I kind of think they're slipping a little bit because there are crises and there are opportunities out there for them to take advantage of. There really are. I look at East Palestine. You remember East Palestine? Remember that? There was a little train thing that happened. Some train cars and some, vinyl chloride and some, bad drinking water and some stuff. Remember that? Remember when that happened? I know it was so long ago. Like 4 months ago. An eternity in political life. But what's been done since? It's basically been forgotten. And as I understand, yesterday you had a number of residents from East Palestine who went to the Ohio Capitol saying, hey, Governor, Republican, DeWine, how about you do something to help us out? How about a little something for the effort? How about something, to clean up the water? How about something to, I don't know, do what's right? And I guess they were, summarily dismissed. And, the sad reality is they've still got to go back to homes where the drinking water is not drinkable. They've still got to go back to places where they're dealing with the reality of the mess that was left by the railroad industry. And they've got a Republican government who's doing nothing to help them. And you go, well, that's what's going on. And this is the frustrating part of this, because I keep coming back to the realities. The realities are Republicans hate working people. There can be no other explanation. Because this is a perfect opportunity for them to say, hey, we got resources. We get money from Biden, put our name on it, fix East Palestine, and say we did it. But they won't even do that. That, my friends, that is just mind-blowing. But here's the reality. These are the same people who we talked about yesterday. The Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. That doesn't really give any tax cuts to working families. If you're a rich guy, you're going to get a boatload of money. But if you're a working stiff, maybe you get $40. That's a messaging bill. The message they're sending you is they don't care about you. And all of this is messaging. Again, Democrats do such a poor job of it. And then look, Josh Shapiro, good on you, man. It's about time we get someone who understands how to do the job and then show people, look what we're doing. Transparency, accountability. Incredible stuff to me. Now you go, but Rick, you're just being mean to the Republicans. They've got plans. They've got ideas. They're going to help. They're going to help the middle class. They're going to help your working people. Yes, they are. They said they are. Again, I come back to what did they say and what are they doing? Yeah, they can say all they want. They want to help. Oh yeah, we care. Look at how much we care. We care so much that the Republican Study Committee, they have released their proposal. Now remember, again, this is one of those hypocritical moments. Republicans don't want to cut Social Security. No, we would never do that. How dare you say we would do such a thing? We would never. Republican Study Committee yesterday released their plan to gradually raise the retirement age from, 67 now, up to 69 by 2033. Now, if you remember, back in the old days, 7 to 10 years ago, The age that they wanted to start doing this at is 50, 52, 55, somewhere in that range. So you had time. If they're going to screw with your Social Security, you got time to make it up in other ways. You've got time to do other stuff. Well, what they're planning on doing is, they're still going to raise it to 69. That's still the goal. But the trigger number is if you're turning 62 in 2033. So if you're 52 right now, you're screwed. If you're 52 or older, you're screwed right now. Or 52 and younger, you're screwed. If you're 53 right now, you're okay. You made the cut. You're only going to have to wait to 67. And this is, again, one of those things, as I said, this isn't a new policy. This is something that they've been floating for years. But I throw it out here because these are the people who, if you remember, now again, remember, they would never cut Social Security. We would never do that. We never wanted to do any of those things. We're being wrongly accused. Oh, poor woe is us. Except those of us who do have memories and do remember the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years know that this has always been the goal. Now, the threat that they use is, if we do nothing, it's going to eventually lead to a benefit cut of 23% because in several years, if we continue to do nothing, there is a very real problem. And we could solve that problem. We could by, a whole bunch of different things. I don't know, scrapping the cap would be a good idea, raising that top number to where maybe our very wealthy, maybe they don't pay Social Security tax only on day 1 of the year. Maybe we go, hey, we're going to ask you to pay Social Security tax for 2 days. Yeah, maybe the first 2 days, maybe a week. How about a week? Can we get a week out of you? Whereas the average working stiff, you're paying 24/7, 365. They're getting Social Security out of you on every dime you earn, and yet are very well-to-do on just on a portion. I think we could fix that. I think that could be something. If you look at Social Security the way I do, not as a retirement plan, but as anti-poverty insurance to ensure that working people who work their lives, who work hard, play by the rules, actually have something in retirement, I think my idea is a very good one. And it's something we should be moving on. Now, Republicans know if they stall long enough, if they delay long enough, eventually they're going to get their wet dream. Oh boy. Oh, they're going to get all tingly and all, warm and fuzzy, which is why the numbers haven't changed. So you go, now if you go, hey, if you're 55 today by 2023, or we'll raise it to something, no. They want to make sure that they're getting you. And they've targeted that because that number, I believe, and I got to look into the research into this, that's going to hit the most number of people, especially working people. And it's weird because these are the Trump folks that they're really targeting. It's quite remarkable to me, but I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think my favorite story from Trump arraignment day came from the after party, if you will. Now, this story's made its rounds already, and I'm sure everyone's already seen it, but it is one of the most Trumpian things ever. It really is. We're going to promise everyone, come to this Cuban restaurant, this Cuban bakery. I'm going to feed everybody. So come and let's have our little prayer. They got together for their big prayer, happy birthday thing. And they did all that stuff. Very performative. He got his PR little stunt, got his photo op, got his mug in the paper, got all that on TV, and then bolts. Nobody got a donut. Nobody got a cupcake. Nobody got a cup of coffee. Nothing. But it was one of those things. We're gonna feed everybody. Food for everyone. Not even a cookie. Not a cookie. Again, one of the most Trumpian things ever. And what's interesting to me is, I look at the people who follow him, and I'm struggling, man, because there are so many of these stories of him stiffing people. There's so many stories of his inability to make good decisions. And I've gotten a lot of positive traction out of saying, look, his parents were crappy parents. They raised a crummy kid. They raised a spoiled, rotten child, and the rest of us are going to have to deal with his tantrums. I love, I love when you hear people, I don't want to sit next to a crying baby on the plane. Well, we've got a crying baby running for president again. And the thing that gets me is, they put him up on this pedestal. Oh, he's the smartest guy. He's all this. I look at this story coming out of the Washington Post. Now, if you remember during the years he was in the White House, the reports came out from inside the White House that he spent most of his time watching the F channel and basically doing whatever the hell they told him to do. So whatever he got in his head from them or from talk radio, because they get ratings, he did. He pursued. That was his idea. It's turning out to look like potentially part of these documents being taken and held onto for so long is the result of him listening to this guy, Tom Fitton, who is the head of this right-wing group, Judicial Watch, who goes and files a bunch of frivolous lawsuits so that they can raise money off of it. I guess this guy had given Trump advice that Trump has followed, that I don't even know if Fitton's a lawyer, that his lawyers are like, maybe don't. This would be, again, one of those very Trumpian things. And it's remarkable to me that someone has gotten this far in life without, I don't know, I'm having a tough time. But here's the weird thing. All of this stuff, all of this news, all this information, all these things that keep, you're just looking for bad things, Rick. You're just picking on the guy. I did not give anybody a cookie. We go to strike lines. When we go to strike line, we bring stuff. I've never walked away from a strike line without bringing something. I've never done these kind of events without going, I promise something, it's going to be done. Never. But here's the thing. New national research poll finds that in New Hampshire, Trump has increased his lead over DeSantis by another 5 points. It's 44-12. You got Tim Scott's the next closest with Chris Christie at 7%, Nikki Haley 5%. But the more that comes out about Trump, it seems the more that the faithful love about him. Now, here's the weird thing, and this is where I had this conversation today with someone. that he's going to be acquitted. And I'm going, I don't know. Numbers aren't really on his side because as Pew pointed out today, out of the nearly 72,000 federal criminal cases last year, out of the nearly 72,000, in fact, 71,944, only 290 were acquittals. That, my friends, that is a heck of a record. 0.4% get acquitted. If I'm rolling the dice, I got to tell you, 99.6% chance I'm getting convicted. I'm looking for a deal. Now, the weird thing is, and this is the weird thing, evidently there were attempts to make a deal. I got to wonder who he listened to say, no, you don't need a deal. No, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, man. I mean, it just gets weirder and weirder. Again, I forget who said this to me not a couple years ago, that you couldn't, if you went to Netflix with this script, they would send you down the road packing. And look, there's some pretty much garbage on Netflix. Or a lot of these streaming services. There's a lot of stuff there. Or YouTube. You couldn't even go to YouTube with this and go, okay, can I put this YouTube video up on your platform? They would even balk at it of how outrageous it is. And now we've got this. You got Chuck Grassley, and this is, you go, Chuck, buddy, what is wrong with you? Saying that they've got evidence. They've got tapes. They've got Biden by the snarklies. Evidently, they've got him. I'm sure there's other things that they've got. Evidently, the claim is that he solicited a bribe. He got bribed. He's on the take, and they've got the receipts. Only, if you remember, James Comer, the Republican from Kentucky, who admitted that, well, we kind of lost our guy. Don't know if he really actually don't know where he is. Which is code for we never had anyone. I believed someone's BS, and well, there's nothing. Now, because again, yesterday everyone was crazy. We've got the whistleblower. It's we've got the person who did it. We've got the smoking guns. Now Rudy Giuliani has come out and said, well, sorry, the person passed away. Person died. And now this is Giuliani saying he knew this chief accountant at Burisma knew who it was, but died under suspicious circumstances, said a woman unnamed. You can't make this stuff up. Now, my mind goes into fun places because heck, Republicans are good in making up stories. If you lived through the 90s like I did, you know that Bill Clinton was the number one asset for wet work in the world. Killed George Foster, killed a bunch of people. While doing presidential stuff, snuck out through the JFK tunnel, put on the black suit, went out, did his criming, and then snuck back in. Nobody ever caught him. Nobody ever caught him. No one knew it was him. In fact, it's kind of like he was a ghost. So my mind goes, I'll bet you Bill Clinton got his wet work suit back on, snuck out from Hillary, and went and did the deed. I mean, I'm waiting for that to be I'm waiting for them to say, Joe Biden, who tripped over the sandbag, it's really a ploy. Joe Biden went out and did the wet work himself. I'm waiting for that argument to tell you just how goofy these people are. As my grandfather always said, there are some people who will lie when the truth would be better. I think we're seeing them. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day anti-union violence erupted in the Valley of Steel. The Little Steel Strike was then in its 20th day. The strike had spread to Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Newspaper headlines screamed, 30 clubbed, stabbed, shot in strike. Guerrilla warfare breaks out anew in Pennsylvania. The day had been marred by hours of fighting with scabs and the police as miners joined picketers in support. Strikers lobbed rocks at scab cars attempting to drive through picket lines and successfully overturned a number of vehicles. Steel-helmeted police attacked strikers, swinging riot clubs and launching tear gas shells. One picketer, Tony Mandos, was in critical condition after having been shot twice by police. Mayor Daniel Shields announced he had deputized 250 special police and was preparing to, quote, raise an army of 3,000 American Legionnaires by nightfall to protect the city of Johnstown from strikers. At Warren, Ohio, dynamite crippled railroad operations at a struck Republic steel mill on the Ashtabula-Niles branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad. The explosion came after carloads of raw material had been shunted in and products shipped out of the mill. Auto plants throughout the Midwest slowed production for lack of steel-made parts. UAW President Homer Martin dispatched a telegram to CIO leader John L. Lewis saying, quote, we are standing by ready to refuse to use steel made in struck plants in the production of automobiles unless the steel companies make a speedy and amicable settlement with the striking steelworkers. The CIO threatened a 20,000-strong strike support rally through the streets of Johnstown to protest the violence. They claimed victory when the governor quickly declared martial law and padlocked the gates of the Cambria Works.
Why would your local newspaper not even mention an important local news story? Perhaps because it's a damning story about the conglomerate owner of the paper. This month, hundreds of journalists working for major dailies in some 24 cities across America joined in an extraordinary mass walkout from their jobs. They were protesting the rank greed, gross mismanagement, and abandonment of democratic duty by the owner of their papers. That owner is Gannett, a massive financial conglomerate that has grabbed control of more than 200 dailies in 43 states. This is a huge, multidimensional news story about news itself. But where was the coverage? Big story number one. Unbeknownst to most people in these communities, they no longer have a local daily paper. Control over everything from news content to price now belongs to bean-counting strangers at Gannett headquarters hundreds of miles away. Big story number two. More fundamentally, control has moved from journalists to bankers. Gannett is owned by SoftBank, a Japanese hedge fund that has rapaciously looted American newsrooms to grab extravagant fees, salaries, and profits for its rich financial hucksters. Big story number three. The workaday hometown reporters, photographers, and others who actually produced Gannett's papers are making a gutsy stand against the profiteer, not just for themselves, but for the essential ideals of journalistic integrity and grassroots democracy. Biggest story of all. Gannett's 200 papers cravenly joined in a concerted blanket cover-up of this story, stiffing the public they're supposed to serve and disrespecting the ethical stand of their own employees. Even Gannett's flagship paper, USA Today, which regularly reports on other labor actions, took a dive on covering the journalistic malfeasance of its own overseer. This is Jim Hightower saying, to fight hedge fund corporatization of journalism, go to newsguild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I love this comment by the folks at the National Review. They're saying that pardoning is not enough for Donald Trump. No, pardoning not enough. We must all perform seppuku for Donald Trump. We're going to all have to gut ourselves in public for the dear leader. I just find that hysterical. I don't know why that caught my funny bone. Probably as funny as the quote from, what's her name? The Wasilla woman? Sarah Palin. She was on Newsmax asked about being a cult member for Trump. And she said, no, not cult members, no. The definition, she said, of a cult is a group of people who are excessively supporting one another and a cause, all about conformity and compliance and intolerance of anyone who disagrees with what their mission is. And so why is that not why you're in a cult? Maybe here to answer that question and help me work my way through it, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, help me, please.
Hello and happy Thursday.
So, thoughts? I agree with her. She got something right. I mean, this is like the blind squirrel finding a nut. She actually, pretty good definition. Nailed
Broken
it.
clock is right. Broken clock's still right twice a day. So, that's pretty much Sarah Palin in a nutshell. Definitely in the nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. In the nutshell here. I'm going, did I miss something? Evidently, I must have.
Yeah, I feel like she would be an expert on what cults are.
Right?
It seems like her little compound that she sort of built, and then she tried to get that TV show for a while, and then like all of that was really this idea of building a cult of personality around herself. And so I think that's how legitimate cults begin, is with that idea of a specific person, and everybody's got to rally around that person. Like, the people in Waco were there for like 50 years before David Koresh showed up, and only then did it become a cult.
Right.
So,
well, good point. I was thinking about this today, as I was reading her quote, and I'm going, I wish we could somehow reanimate John McCain. If there was an AI way to bring John McCain back, to ask him, what the hell were you thinking?
oh, I know, right? Like, that is the one question I feel like we really never got a good answer to before he passed. And I don't know that it was necessarily him. Like, it really does seem like a lot of it came down to the desperation of, pulling somebody in that was different, and that was all they had to work with.
But, I look at all of this, where we are. I mean, Lindsey Graham. What do you think of Lindsey, John? I'd love to hear that comment, too. All of that.
Oh, man. Seriously, that would be a good question to ask. And I think, honestly, McCain had to have seen the direction that the Republican Party was going, just based off of what he saw between 2000 and after 2004, because that whole era of politics really shifted to kind of bring the culture wars into the mainstream, particularly with George Bush's, big campaign for evangelicals to vote against marriage equality in a bunch of states. So that's sort of been a big part of the beginning of this, and it has just grown more and more from there. And it's the last dying breath of the far right. If they can't fight back now, they're done in a couple of years, because a lot of the people who believe in their ideology are going to be dead. Not because of people killing them, but they're just old. They're going to die.
No, I know where you're going with that. And speaking of old, I was just talking about Rudy Giuliani, who's back in the news again. I guess Rudy needs something to stay relevant. What's amazing to me is this guy was at one point a somewhat respected federal prosecutor. This guy was a respected lawyer at one point. I mean, you got to go way back for that. The number of things that he's been involved in that are just let's genuinely say, I don't know, suspect. I don't know. Critical. I'm trying to figure out the right word here of the lies and the nonsense that he's brought out. But I'm trying to be, at least, somewhat.
You're being entirely too charitable.
That's the word I'm looking for. I'm trying to be charitable, trying to be nice.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I'm sure Rudy appreciates that. I don't know that the rest of the world does. But yeah, Rudy's had this, he's been after this whole Burisma story, this big conspiracy around Ukraine. He went to Ukraine. He tried to get all of this information that he dug up. And that has been the source, like the only real conspiracy theory that Republicans have managed to grab onto. And I don't know if it's just that they couldn't find anything else, and so that they just sort of thought, oh, well, here's a conspiracy that we can grab. We'll just use this one. But genuinely, it seems like this is the whole shebang for them. And what we have seen since Republicans took over Congress is they focused so much on that conspiracy. But as all of it goes back to, every road leads back to Rudy Giuliani. Like every piece of information that all of these people are getting, all these Republicans are getting, and they're putting in front of Congress, it all goes back to Rudy Giuliani. And I don't know that Republicans understand that, or it may just be that they know it and they're trying to hide that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I said from the beginning when all the Hunter Biden stuff came out, I'm going, you know what? Look, throughout my entire life, I've heard these kind of stories of nepotism and people using their family name to swindle. That is not new. That's gone on until you can draw me a direct line from whatever Hunter Biden did, or Joe Biden's brother, or his second nieces, cousins, nephews, uncles, brothers, sisters, twice removed. Until you can draw me a direct line from there to Joe Biden, I don't care what they did. And this is them trying to draw that line, and it's not even a dotted line.
Well, their latest conspiracy is this idea of, the FBI has this document that they won't release to the public that alleges that Joe Biden was laundering money. And the thing is that this document that the FBI has, it's not just a document. It is the form that the FBI agent used when somebody came to the FBI and said, I have a tip that I want to give you. Right? So any Yahoo who phones into the FBI, they follow this form, they write all the information on the form, and then that form is filed away.
Right.
That form, the 1023, I'm pretty sure was because it was filled out with Rudy Giuliani's conspiracy theories. And the reason I think that is the case is because Bill Barr kind of suggested it. Rudy Giuliani's hinted at that the same things that are on that are the same things that he's saying now. And I know, and Jamie Raskin has said that after he read the form, that that all of the information that was on it came secondhand.
Right.
So all of those things together basically tell me, okay, this information is probably coming from Rudy Giuliani. So basically, Republicans in Congress are creating this whole conspiracy around Rudy Giuliani giving a tip of his Burisma conspiracies, his Ukraine conspiracies, to the FBI.
Yep.
Bill Barr has already investigated this stuff and decided that Rudy Giuliani was a complete crank and, drunk and whatever. He's made it pretty clear that they've already looked into all of this. But for some reason, Comer and Chuck Grassley keep saying, oh, but, they wouldn't let us look at this form that Rudy Giuliani, that was filled out by the FBI agent. They won't let us see this form. And it's just absurd because all it is the interview with Rudy Giuliani.
But it's all they've got. I mean, and this again is one of those things that shows how desperate they are. But again, what's shocking to me is someone like Grassley would put his name to this. Look, you expect a kook like, you expect, some of the kook class, the Marjorie Three Names and the forehead guy and the gun fetish nut woman. You expect them to come out with this kind of stuff. You expect that. But Grassley's been around forever. Comer's the head of a committee, for crime's sake.
Yeah, and I think basically Grassley got looped into this thing, and I think he's starting to realize, oh crap, I maybe got too far into this before I realized what was going on. The latest idea is that this document alleges that there are tapes of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and that the person that that Rudy Giuliani got these tips from was holding on to these tapes because they wanted to make sure that if they needed them for any kind of whatever, insurance policy, that they would have them and be able to use it.
Bribe or ransom, yeah.
Right. So Comer started mentioning these tapes. And then Grassley comes in and starts mentioning the form and the tapes. And then what has happened over the weekend is that you find out that Rudy Giuliani says the person who had these tapes has died.
Yep.
And this is like the new weird conspiracy theory. And then here's the thing, like Thursday is my Friday, right? So at the end of the day, I'm looking to like kick back and get out of work. And like half an hour before I'm supposed to be off work, I see Midas Touch post this video of Rudy Giuliani on Newsmax saying, oh my God, my whistleblower from Burisma who had these tapes has suspiciously died. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. And I chased Rudy Giuliani down the stupid rabbit hole like an idiot. And basically what has happened is Rudy claims that the woman who died was married to a guy, and he's the one who made these tapes. And he suspiciously died too. Rudy didn't mention the name. He didn't mention how she dies. Nobody knows anything about this. Come to find out, the only person that he's saying could have died that worked for Burisma, that was the CEO of Burisma, only guy that could apply to is this one Ukrainian dude. He and his buddy were the ones who founded Burisma. The dude died in 2011. So Hunter Biden didn't get appointed to the Burisma board until 2014. That's 3 years later. Joe Biden didn't even go to Ukraine until what, like 2015? So this whole conspiracy theory is coming from a guy who says that he made tapes to try and persuade Joe and Hunter Biden of something because that he made them somehow like 3 years before he even met them.
Right.
And that now, the woman who had these tapes is now suspiciously disappeared. And he doesn't know her name and anything else.
He
and you're
doesn't
just
know
like,
her name, no. But I have a theory of who did the wet work, though.
Tell.
It was Bill Clinton. Because
Right?
if you remember, Bill is our when you need some wet work, some political wet work done, he's the guy, man. If you listen to right-wing conspiracies from the 90s, he killed a bunch of people, snuck out through the JFK tunnel, got his little dark suit on, and did the deed.
And have you heard about his sock drawer? I mean, that's the new conspiracy is Bill Clinton is hiding things in his sock drawer, y'all.
I'm sure
that is the
he is.
new. Oh my God! Like holy cats!
I'm sure he is. They're probably little blue pills.
So this has been the stupid rabbit hole I chased down. But this is what James Comer is talking about. This is what Chuck Grassley has got himself into. And you're like, wait a minute. This took me 45 minutes to figure this out. And you're telling me that you've been in Congress and dealing with this for months and you don't already know this? Either you are the biggest idiot that has ever been in Congress, which is really saying something, or you are actually lying to the American people.
No, and this is one of those things that I don't think they care about the truth. This is about the ends justifying the means. This is about we've got to go after Biden. We've got to get some dirt. There's got to be a reason for impeachment. There's got to be a reason to justify what Trump's done. There's got to be all of this stuff, and that's my problem with this polar red hat blue hat stuff. Look, what Trump did was wrong. Those were crimes. If we could dig up Ronald Reagan and reanimate him, I guarantee I know what side of this divide he's going to be on. And it's not going to be the orange side. Yeah,
hell, if we reanimated Ronald Reagan, he'd probably be a Democrat by now.
Yeah, he'd be back to being a Democrat. You're right.
That's what's so crazy is that they've gone that far, down the off the reservation.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. I got a couple other things I got to jump into real quick before we get out of this. I wanted to get your thoughts on Herschel Walker's going back to college.
Bless his heart.
I got to wonder, is it so that he can pay for some more abortions of college girls?
I assumed it was because he was trying to get another job, working for the university as like a coach or something. And this way he could get it through work study. And, because otherwise he wasn't going to get hired. So it was like the only way he could have a gig. Anytime an older person decides to go back to school, I say good on you. Let's just say that.
Okay, no, I'm right there. Look, he was valedictorian. He had all these accolades. Maybe now he's going to go back and get them. And good for him. All in favor of it. Also, wanted to get your thoughts on Whoopi Goldberg's thought that she wants a constitutional amendment that says you shouldn't be able to run for to run the country from the joint. I'm against the idea of a constitutional amendment. banning people from running from office from prison, because I look at Eugene V. Debs and I find him to be somebody that I historically look up to, and he did it. So I'm against it. Thoughts?
Yeah, like that was kind of the conversation we were having online today. You and I were on Twitter. Is her big thing is, you can't vote from prison. You shouldn't be able to run for office from prison, and you shouldn't be able to then, run the country from prison. And I'm with you. Like I think honestly everybody who is in prison should be able to vote. They're still citizens. They still have a constitutional right to vote. And that's actually been tested, not the vote part of it, but they still have constitutional rights. That's been tested in court with Michael Cohen's thing most recently, where they tried to say he couldn't write a book in prison. They're like, no, he still has First Amendment rights. So the Constitution applies to people when they're in prison. And that to me means like folks should be able to vote from there. And then maybe we could get some prison reform. But two, I think there's nothing wrong with folks being able to run from prison. You look at some of the most amazing abolitionists of our time who have been imprisoned and wrote amazing things from prison and continued to be activists from jail. And
no, look, I think it'd be a really big uphill climb, and I think there should be something that says that you can't then pardon yourself. I think something like that has to be in place, but I think you should be able to vote. I think you should be able to run for office. I don't think you're going to win. I think the chances are pretty slim. You're not going to be out knocking on doors and shaking hands and kissing babies from jail. But this again seems like one of those overreaction things.
I think so too. Can you imagine the campaign ads? Like, how would you film a campaign ad from your tiny little cell? Like, would your cell block mates be the ones giving you endorsements? Like, how would that work? But I mean, the one piece of it where I think Trump applies here is I think if you were convicted of espionage, I think that's game over. And the law actually does state that unless if you've been convicted of espionage, you can't serve as president. And I think that's completely reasonable.
So I still say he's not going to go to jail, even if he is convicted. I know I've had a lot of people go, no, I think you're wrong. And I go, I don't know how you imprison a president. I can see house arrest. I can see, hey, you got to stay, in that presidential bathroom where you kept the records, which I think would be an appropriate sentence. But thoughts?
I think back to the Paul Manafort imprisonment. Remember when he was in that jail up in like Northwest Virginia,
the country club?
And he described it like being a VIP. Basically, he had his own huge, monstrous area. He had his own phone. He had a desk and a computer and like basically everything that he needed to be able to run his office and run his operation from prison.
Keep the crimes going. Yep.
Right. And so to me, it's like, well, why couldn't you do that with Donald Trump? Like, I mean, I think we've made it pretty clear just from folks looking through the Secret Service laws, and he will have Secret Service protection while he's in prison. But, why can't you just basically stick him in his own little cell block area and be like, all right, have fun?
No, wouldn't that be a crummy detail?
Right, but at the same time, he wouldn't have to do anything.
Wouldn't that be a crummy detail?
Right, you just have to sit there, and if he's on camera, I mean, he's not going to go anywhere. But if he's in his own cell block area, then nobody could get to him. Maybe Jeffrey Epstein could.
Could you I mean, stop and really think about this. I was thinking about this the other day when Trump took office. I came on the air and I said, get ready. This is going to be a really bizarre 4 years. Going to be the most corrupt ever. There's going to be more criming. There's going to be things that we can't even imagine. It's going to be, it's going to be a historic. He will be remembered. And I think back to, where my mind was capable of going and how far, how bad. And I kept coming back to no one could have imagined this. I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't think it was going to be this.
Yeah, I agree. I think in my wildest imagination, He kind of blew it out of the water the first couple of months, though, just with that hell with the first press conference that Sean Spicer did, where it's like, he had the most people ever. And I was like, oh wow, this is now it begins. The beginning of the downfall. And yeah, but it's just, everybody keeps comparing it to terrible governments, to the third world, to dictatorships. The thing is that there are a heck of a lot of people, a heck of a lot of leaders all over the world who have been charged with crimes, who've been convicted of crimes, who've been put in jail, some from democracies. It's not unheard of. It happens.
Yeah.
And it's just, we managed to go 200 years without it being a president. We've had a heck of a lot of members of Congress who've been put in prison.
Yeah, I got a friend. I got a friend who spent some time in prison, Bob Ney, who's
hell. You've got senators who were dueling, outside the Capitol off the floor. So come on, it's just basically a step off from that. It's a more modernized version of that.
No, but what's interesting is I read something a little bit ago that said that Republicans don't understand what he's being charged with. They don't understand the significance. They've been all hung up in this talk radio version of this is just an attack on Trump. It's poor pitiful him. He's a victim. Biden did the exact same thing, and the reality is no. Nobody's done this ever in history. Nobody. This is the first time this has been done at this kind of a level. This is historic, and this is illegal.
And I do think that the major part of this is a lot of folks are going to have to start doing some education campaign, because one of the videos we saw this week of Trump supporters outside of the Miami courthouse is, people were asking, well, have you read the indictment? And they're like, no. Why would I read the indictment?
Yeah.
So there has to be an education campaigin where, and maybe it's all of the special interest groups from the Lincoln Project to Midas, and to talk about what's actually in it.
Waste of time, because they're never going to listen. The fives are.
But
never
I think we're not
listen.
But we're not trying to convince them. We're trying to make sure everybody else, in the country understands what's going on.
I think polling-wise, I think 69% of people go, yeah, he did something wrong. I mean, that's a pretty good majority. The red hats, they're never, no matter how much education you throw out, no matter how many facts. Well, there was the one video of the woman going, well, that's not his bathroom. That looks like Joe Biden's bathroom. Where do you get that from?
Who out of the two of them is going to have both a chandelier on the ceiling and one on the wall?
Well, he's got the chandelier because he got the $5 million from Burisma.
Within, what was that, like 3 feet? You got two Who does that? Who does that? Come on.
Well, you got to have a chandelier in every picture. Every selfie you're taking on the can, man.
Oh, Lord.
That's the presidential library, by the way.
I love that picture where that same picture, I didn't notice it at first, but when you look over the shower curtain, you see the boxes were stacked in the bathtub. I totally missed that the first time. It was like, oh my God. So it's, can't shower in there. Bummer.
The one thing that surprised me is that the toilet wasn't gold. I thought it was going to be golden. Thought it was golden.
Well, it's because it's in Florida. That doesn't really go with the scheme.
Doesn't go with the scheme.
The public uses that toilet too, I think, because it's, right off the course, and it's pretty accessible to people.
I thought that was the most secure location. There were Secret Service people out there. The door locked. If you listen to Kevin McCarthy, Biden had, stuff in the garage. At least, in the bathroom, you can lock the door.
The bathroom locks from the inside, you fool.
Yes,
I mean, at least Joe Biden, you gotta.
Sarah, I appreciate the time, man. Always good stuff. Rawstory.com is the website. Sarah Burris is the reporter. Thank you, Sarah. We'll see you back here next week.
Glad you feel better. Have a good weekend.
Right back.
Hundreds of thousands left their homes. Evacuations accredited for saving lives as the extreme weather continued to disrupt them.
Powerful cyclone Mocha causes widespread destruction in Myanmar. It'll cost $30 billion to clean up abandoned oil and gas wells in the Gulf of Mexico alone. Plus,
we make a major step forward in the climate crisis, protecting public health.
Biden EPA unveils new rules to clean up carbon pollution from the nation's power plants.
All of those new rules and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
All across the country, you are sounding the alarm, demanding action, and sparking a global movement to address the urgency of the climate crisis.
Thank you for noticing, EPA Administrator Michael Regan. You're doing a good job, too. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, big news here in the U.S. when it comes to power plants, but yeah, still big, bad climate problems across the globe.
Yes, indeed. Tropical cyclone Mocha struck Myanmar and Bangladesh on Sunday, just shy of a Category 5 storm, killing 6 and injuring hundreds. Aid workers are struggling to reach areas devastated by widespread flooding and landslides, with electricity and communications cut off. Hundreds of Rohingya refugee shelters were destroyed. Cyclone Mocha is the latest storm to intensify rapidly right before landfall due to unusually warm ocean waters. Scientists say rapid intensification of storms has become more common worldwide, increasing in both frequency and magnitude due to man-made global warming.
Yeah, we're seeing a whole lot of that year after year after year now.
April 2023 was the fourth hottest April ever recorded globally since record-keeping began in the mid-1800s. That's according to NASA and NOAA. In the southern hemisphere, April was the warmest month of any month ever recorded. The world's oceans globally were the second warmest on record, and global sea surface temperatures have been pushing record highs for 2 months now, linked to the rapidly developing El Nino climate pattern in the Pacific Ocean. Now, some scientists also theorize that some of the spike in ocean temperatures could be related to the perverse effect of new regulations cutting smog pollution from ships, which previously reduced solar radiation reaching the ocean.
So we're making cleaner ships, and that actually makes the oceans warmer because the ships are no longer blocking the sun with their dirty smoke?
That's the theory.
Wow.
In other news, plugging abandoned oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico will cost about $30 billion, according to a new study, and that's about 6 times what the Biden administration allocated in the infrastructure bill for plugging both onshore and offshore wells. Researchers estimate the Gulf has about 14,000 unplugged abandoned oil and gas wells, which can spill oil and leak methane. Federal law requires companies to pay cleanup costs, and while most of the abandoned wells in federal waters were at some point owned by giant oil companies like Exxon, smaller operators in state waters have frequently gone bankrupt, leaving taxpayers on the hook to pay for the cleanup of those orphaned wells.
Imagine that.
The Supreme Court has narrowly upheld a California law that bans the sale of pork from operations that breed the animals in severely confined cages. The pork industry had argued that California infringed on regulations in states where the pork producers are based, but in a 5-4 ruling, conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch said, quote, while the Constitution addresses many weighty issues, the type of pork chops California merchants may sell is not on that list.
Wow. Is Neil Gorsuch okay?
Finally, the Biden administration Environmental Protection Agency has proposed new rules to clean up pollution and planet-warming carbon emissions from U.S. coal and natural gas-fired power plants, the nation's second largest source of emissions. It's a key step in curbing emissions in the rest of the economy from vehicles, buildings, and industry. Basically, the draft rules would require existing and future fossil-fueled power plants to cut their greenhouse gas emissions by 90% by 2038. With options to do so, like switching to cleaner sources or capturing their carbon dioxide emissions. Plants that don't meet the standards would have to retire by 2042. Now, critics note that it gives coal plants a full decade to reduce their emissions, and that would miss President Biden's target of 100% clean electricity nationally by 2035. In announcing the new rules late last week, EPA Administrator Michael Regan highlighted the lives that will be saved from cleaning up pollution and emissions, and acknowledged much more needs to be done to address climate change.
We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity for real climate action. So failure is not an option. Inaction is not an option.
Republican-controlled states are expected to sue to stop the new pollution rules, which must survive the right-wing supermajority on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes, of course, that is their version of taking action.
Yep.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I love this great economy project that's going on. The good folks over at the Patriotic Millionaires have put together this great economy project. And if you want to check it out, AmericanAgenda.com is the website where you get this. They're going into communities and they're doing a little education around taxation. I know, really sexy stuff, but something that should be nonpartisan. And I think we need to be focusing on a lot of issues that are nonpartisan, like building roads and bridges and, educating our children. Somehow, in the past, we saw these as nonpartisan issues. Maybe it's a good idea that we start. The thing that I love about them is they're actually getting on the ground. They've been doing this in North Carolina for a little bit. They're in Richland Center, Wisconsin, as we speak, but they're also doing an online component. In fact, they had a meeting last night online that folks participated in, and here to share some thoughts on this great American agenda, the Great Economy Project. I've asked Kat Hadley to come talk with us. She's the state campaign manager for the Great Economy Project. Again, AmericanAgenda.com, the website. Kat, thanks for taking time for us.
Always. Thanks so much for having me.
So, what are we doing here? What's the goal of? Did I lay this out okay? I mean, I never like to speak for people in their organizations, so walk me through what you're doing.
Sure. So, and I just became the director of the Great Economy Project, which is a cool step up. So the Great Economy Project, what we're trying to do is go into states and talk with people about economic issues and really give them the data to back up their lived experience. I think a lot of times people think that, maybe, I don't have this economic mobility because, it's a personal thing that I've done. Whether it's like somebody like myself, like I was a high school dropout and worked for minimum wage jobs for a long time. And, a lot of it can feel like, well, this is just what it is, later in college, I was lucky enough to have a support system where I could go back, and B, I could learn about the systems that made a lot of my life at that time what it was, and asking them to say, basically what we do is we try to educate them, and then we say, okay, about this system now, about our take on the economy, which is basically there needs to be a livable minimum wage, there need to be higher taxes on the rich, and we need better political equity for everyone, to just kind of wrap it up in a bow for you.
Right.
But we give them that education through a series of lectures from different professionals, and then we ask them, what do you want to do with it? And we give them the infrastructure to do that. So in Whiteville, North Carolina, where our pilot project is, they're doing an advocacy day, and what that looks like is filling a bus load of people from Whiteville, North Carolina, to go up to Raleigh and talk to lawmakers about minimum wage issues. And so we don't really we because we operate in kind of a different space, we don't necessarily say like, here's who you should vote for, or here's the bills you should support. But what we'll say, here's what's been tried. Here's what's working well in states that are doing these things.
You're basically creating a citizen lobbying brigade. You're basically engaging with citizens to go and do what citizens are supposed to do.
Yeah, well, and to challenge them, because I think a lot of times, and I'm sure you see this, where I run into people all the time and they'll say, well, we can't do anything to change this. No one's going to listen to them. And what I try to challenge is, well, that can feel very true. Do you think that maybe that system is there for a reason? Do you think that maybe sometimes when we feel disenfranchised in that system is easier to manipulate and to really make the system what it is today? Yeah. So You know, a lot of it is challenging the idea that we're all powerless and that there's nothing that we can do about anything.
Yeah, the other thing that I see a lot, my conservative friends love to throw this out at me. Go, well, you know, people just need to work hard. You know, there's opportunity out there. You pull your bootstraps, pull yourself up, go work hard. And the reality is I don't know if you've ever worked in a fast food restaurant. That's hard work. That's a lot of hard work. That's more hard work than I want to do, especially for the poor wages that they get paid. This idea that hard work is the solution. Look, everybody should work hard. Absolutely 100% on board with that. But that's not the panacea. That's not the only answer here.
Well, and, you know, I always tell people, you know, when we're in these meetings, you know, when I worked as a waitress, those shifts I would come home and collapse, you know, and that's the other thing too, is on the other side of this is I run into legislators that say things like, well, they're not coming to me to talk about this issue, so it must not be an issue. And it's like, these are your hardest working constituents that don't have the time to do this. They don't have the physical ability to do this. Sometimes they don't even have the car. When I worked for minimum wage, I didn't have a car. I couldn't drive to Lansing. That's where I'm from, Michigan. I couldn't drive to Lansing and tell them, hey, you need to negotiate this wage floor for me. And so, I think the idea that we live in a system where you can maybe work your way up or do these things, it could have been true in the 80s, but it's just not, it's not even true anymore. And we know, like, you know, there's that amazing chart from the Economic Policy Institute that shows that in the 70s or so, compensation just branched from productivity. You know, they're not tied together, and they haven't been for years, and that gap keeps growing and growing and growing. So,
but
you know,
what I do there, Kat, and if I could throw this in there, especially for your great economy project, there's also another great graph that they had that shows union density and labor union participation, how it does the exact same thing. How from the end of World War II up into right about the middle 70s, productivity went up, wages kept pace right with it. And as union density deadlined, so did the ability of workers to get better wages, hours, and conditions. So I think there's something there potentially, maybe something we could throw in there a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, our program is always growing and changing. You know, we have the online cohort right now, and people are throwing out different ideas, and we do try to take feedback from participants and see if we can bring in experts, you know, because we want to give people information they can use and have that grow over time. And with the other part of this, you know, with the activist side of this, we also, you know, we do this thing called American Deciders. So after you go through the education, you can join the American Deciders. And that's not necessarily just community action events, but we're also trying to have them plan monthly dinners where we have experts go in and talk about whatever they want to learn about, you know, because there's so much that goes on, you know, like when we talk about any current events, you know, with the economy, where you kind of need this background, but it's hard to access for people. Maybe it's behind a paywall, or maybe it's just not explained in the terms that we can actually use in day to day, you know, and so we want to make sure that we can kind of continue to educate as we go.
No, what I love about what you guys are doing, and I've said this before, is it's the actual face-to-face, on-the-ground grassroots organizing. Look, there's a lot of online tools, and yes, you're doing the online thing, and that's great, but there's still nothing better than being in a room full of a bunch of people with a bunch of thoughts and having dinner and throwing ideas across the table. Maybe they get heated, maybe it doesn't, but at the end of the day, you walk away going, hey, we all, no matter where we're at on this issue, we all want to move the country forward. And we walk away with that in mind, and not, I hate that red hat or that blue hat or whatever. I think what you're doing is really important.
Thank you so much. Well, and I think what we saw in our pilot and what really blows people away, you know, we actually had a piece just on NPR Morning Edition this week that came out, and we had some of our cohort members in that piece, which was excellent to like hear their voices in this and have them talk about what it meant. But we had people from all different walks of life. You know, we in our intro, we say that this is for Democrats, Republicans, independents, and hate them all. So, you know, this is for everyone. But the thing that we know, and we knew before going to this, is that Democrats and Republicans agree on these issues. The thing is, can we make this their issue? Can we explain it to them and make it something they can work together on? And for Whiteville, the answer was yes. Right. We can absolutely do this. And so I think that's a great first step.
Can I amend that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Democratic and Republican voters, I think, because, you know, when you talk to people face to face, individually, I agree with you. They're on the same taxation. They're on the same part. Raise the minimum wage on the same page. A lot of this stuff, we're all working people are on the same page. But when you put on the red hat or the blue hat and go to the voting booth and vote for those people who go to D.C. or to Harrisburg, where I live, or to any state capital, there's a disconnect. Because the voting of the party person is much different generally than the wish of the mass. At least that's my thought. Do you see that?
Surprisingly, not in my cohort. That we even have. There's a really great clip of Brittany and this guy Kevin, and she's a Democrat, he's a Republican, but they're both talking about if I had somebody run on this issue, knowing what I know now, I'd have to figure out what to do with that,
So you're making my point for me. The point is the individual voter, they agree. The Republican and the Democrat raise the minimum wage, but yet the Republican Party is hell-bent on never raising the minimum wage. Take pledges against it. And yet these voters are still voting for those people who do these things.
Well, and I think one hope is that, because we really focus on making this a space for everyone. And one hope is that people start demanding that accountability within their party on both sides.
That's it.
Because this is the both sides issue. And what, we can get into that. But
the reason I bring this up is I say all the time, Republicans, take your party back to the sane line.
Yes.
Because there was a time when there were pro-labor Republicans. There was a time when there were pro-minimum wage Republicans. There was a time when, name the issue, where we were somewhere between the curbs. We weren't on the sidewalks throwing platitudes at each other. We weren't yelling at each other from the sidewalks. We were in the streets getting stuff done. That's where I'd like to see us get back to.
Yeah, same, agreed. And I have my family's from Wahpeton, North Dakota, which their little sweater or the gift shop is like Wahpeton, middle of nowhere 5 miles, Wahpeton 10. So it's a small town, and they're all deeply conservative folks, but I've seen with them even the shift, and talking about this program with them, they're like, yeah, I totally agree with this, and they're nurses and oil workers and union folks, really. And so I think that there's an opportunity, if we can cut through the noise and focus and really talk about what this could mean and the tangible difference this would make for people, that's worth fighting for.
Right there.
And
with
also,
you.
I focus on a lot of just, this is our country, and we have to take the time to mend these bridges and to do this work, but it's always worth taking. And so it's really good to see a really positive response within our cohort of people that agree with that and are doing that.
No, good stuff. Now, your next online meet and greet is going to be on June 21st. AmericanAgenda.com is where you go to sign up for this, right?
Yep, American Agenda Online, and we'll have Chuck Collins talking about, he's an amazing researcher from the Institute of Policy Studies, and he's going to talk about the cost of billionaire philanthropy, so where those dollars really end up and how that system has corrupted itself. So it'll be a really interesting meeting. We have our recordings also online, so people that are interested can watch them. And we will have a few more meetings coming after that. We'll be in Richland Center starting on July 12th. And it'll be a really fun time. We'll have another meet and greet. We'll be in Pennsylvania soon as well, and we're looking to expand further, but that's where we have commitments now.
Looking forward to it. And for our listeners in Richland Center, Wisconsin, that's going to be at the Phoenix Center at 100 South Orange Street there in Richland Center on July 12th. We'll make sure we get some links out on how folks can take a look at this. But this sounds like great stuff. I'm hoping people will gravitate to this, if nothing for nothing else, but for curiosity, and maybe they learn something along the way. AmericanAgenda.com, the website. Kat Hadley, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I look forward to hearing more about what you're finding out and the successes you're having. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much, and I'll see you at Netroots.
Yeah, all right. Good stuff. Kat Hadley, remember, check out the website there at AmericanAgenda.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. That's all.
We We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I like Kat Hadley a lot, and I like the work that they're doing at the Great Economy Project. Let's quick go to the phones. I got a caller on line one. What's your name? What's on your mind? Welcome to the show.
Hello, Rick.
Hey,
Guess
Alice.
who? What I wanted to say was, well, I wanted to comment on a couple of things. Number one, you were talking about the Social Security at the beginning of the program, and I can tell you, having just gone through that, my full retirement age is 67. So, of course, when I filed for my Social Security back in last year, I have to take a reduced rate.
Right.
And even though I was already getting it, then when my husband died, to get survivor benefits, it took 2 months. So we definitely need to update the system. We need more people. And the Republicans need to back off and leave things alone. And the second thing I wanted to say is, really? You think it was all Bill Clinton? Oh, come on, Rick. Now, we all know that Hillary, Hillary is the one that's the deadly woman. I mean, come on. You have a good evening, Rick.
Yeah. I thought she was going to attack me for that. I'm going, it's a joke. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's their coupley thing, going doing wet work together. Maybe. Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. But here's the thing. I go back to what Kat was talking about. This idea that, and I've had these conversations with people for years, where you agree on economic issue after economic issue. We should raise taxes on wealthy people. We should have a tax code that, the bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry, because we need the investments. That, public education should be funded. That, divide and conquer is bad. We can go through the issue. And I've got Republican friends who agree. They want good schools, safe neighborhoods, good jobs, good wages, health care, pensions, all that stuff. They want what was the American dream. And yet they continually vote for people who are attempting to destroy all of that. And this is one of those things that's just mind-blowing to me. And look, I ran through this with Democrats back in the 90s and 2000s as well. Look, there are neoliberal Democrats I would not vote for. These free traders, the union busters, to me, that stuff doesn't, the red hat, blue hat, doesn't matter. It comes back to the issues. And this is why I like what the patriotic millionaires are doing in this. They're talking about, this is the issue. How do we get this issue moved? And maybe this is the way forward. How do we get the issue moved? I don't know. Let's quick go to the phones. What's your name and what's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Rick? It's Granny again.
What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. I heard you saying some of the talking points, and at this point,
which talking points? Which ones?
Well, I was getting there. Politics. Can you really have a stance? Like, if you have a stance, you're basically choosing a side. You're almost like trying to get to a civil war at that point, right? Like, shouldn't you be in the middle and just go, listen, I know we're voting for the devil at some point.
if you have a stance, you have to pick a side. But there's this thing called compromise that I throw in there as well.
Well, hold on.
I mean,
you said we have to pick a side. You don't.
Okay. Walk me through your thought on this.
Well, I mean, we don't have to. We don't have to pick a side. I mean, you know, they on January 6th, if it was a real insurrection, they could have just locked the doors and lit the whole building on fire, right? And we could have started over a little bit. And that's what the Constitution was written for.
Was it?
Yes,
the Constitution
it was.
was written so that we could burn down our own capital?
Absolutely. The Canadians did it. Why can't we?
Yeah, I'm not going there with you. I'm not on board with that. So I'm going to pick a side to not be on yours on that one. But do you have another issue?
Okay. No.
Okay.
I'm just asking. What side would you pick? Are you going with Donald Trump on this one? Or
No,
are you
I'm
going
not a Trump
with Joe
supporter
Biden?
at all. I never have been because of a thousand reasons. Are there things that he's done that I like? Are there? Yeah, there are a couple of things I could say that he did that were not bad. But for the most part, I don't think he's a good leader. I don't think he's good for the country. We could go on for probably the next half hour. But would I love to see someone else? Yeah, I absolutely would. Do I think Biden's done a good job? Absolutely. I think the policies he's brought have been very good for the country and moving us in the right direction.
You really think
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. I think, the infrastructure bill is going to help rebuild our country. I think building factories to bring chips production back, reshoring manufacturing is a huge step in the right direction. Breaking some of the neoliberal stuff that's been going on for the last 40 years around open border free trade. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that we've got to do, and we've got to do in a very short order that have been neglected for decades. So, yeah, I think Biden's done a good job.
Okay, and then what about the bribery? And I'm just asking out.
So evidently, we just talked about this. Evidently, the key witness just died, or someone killed them suspiciously. Or here's my problem with all of these conspiracy theories. There's a lot of people, and I said this from the very beginning when this came out. When you can show me a direct line from Hunter Biden and Burisma to Joe Biden's door, then I'm going to be with you. But all we keep hearing from the Giulianis of the world are these wild, fantastical claims that they say on the F channel and on talk radio and on Newsmax, but they never go into a courtroom and put their hand on a Bible and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help them God. And yet I've got a 47-page indictment that is saying this is what Trump did. This is what we're putting our hand on the Bible for. So here's where I am at. When you go in front of a judge and you swear under oath with the fear of perjury that something is true, I will then believe you. But if repeatedly you keep throwing out all of these fantastical claims that you then never bring in front of a judge, I stop believing you. And the 2020 election is a perfect example of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I mean, I'm not going to wholeheartedly agree with you there, and because again, and I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat, dude. Again, I'm more let's burn it to the ground and restart.
All right, anarchy. We love anarchy.
Yeah, I would consider myself an anarcho-capitalist, if you will. You know what I mean?
And in that system, who's the winner in that system? Would it be Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or do you think you do better in that system?
Oh no, those guys probably wouldn't be around too much. No, I would.
Well, they would
say,
own everything.
I would say no. Absolutely, they would not.
How would they not own everything?
Well, have you ever heard of guns?
Oh, okay. So you're going to go steal it from them? Okay. No, I'm okay. I wanted to hear you say that.
It would be taken, and I'm not saying that they would have to, pay that sacrifice or whatever, but I am saying that. And again, you wouldn't have to. You would that ideal.
I got 15 seconds.
An anarcho-capitalist.
Okay. I appreciate the call. I got to take a break here, but I love the idea. We can't tax them, but we'll just get our guns and steal it. Thanks so much for the call. I love it. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Good talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day that the Executive Board of the American Federation of Labor established its Metal Trades Department. The goal was to coordinate the organizing and legislative efforts of those in the many metal trades. The department joined together workers from sheet metal workers to blacksmiths, iron shipbuilders to brass and silver workers, foundry workers to stove mounters, and more. In all, 600,000 workers were members. The new department held its first convention in Cincinnati, Ohio, that following February. One of the earliest major work projects involving the new department was the construction of the Panama Canal. More than 70,000 workers, including many metal workers, worked on the canal over a decade. By the time the canal was completed in 1914, more than 5,000 workers had died on the project. The metals department often had to navigate an ever-changing demand for the skills of its members. In times of war, as orders for battleships soared, the workers were in high demand. During peacetime, orders fell. In 1945, the U.S. Navy recognized the contribution of metal workers during World War II. They christened the USS Joseph S. McDonough. The ship was named after a former Secretary-Treasurer of the Metal Trades Department who had worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. One of the key victories of the Metal Department was the passage of the 1938 Federal Apprenticeship and Training Act. The year prior, Metal Department President John Fry was appointed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt as the labor representative for the first apprenticeship committee. The act formalized apprenticeship training programs. Today, the Metals Department of the AFL-CIO represents thousands of workers in 17 unions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Why would your local newspaper not even mention an important local news story? Perhaps because it's a damning story about the conglomerate owner of the paper. This month, hundreds of journalists working for major dailies in some 24 cities across America joined in an extraordinary mass walkout from their jobs. They were protesting the rank greed, gross mismanagement, and abandonment of democratic duty by the owner of their papers. That owner is Gannett, a massive financial conglomerate that has grabbed control of more than 200 dailies in 43 states. This is a huge, multidimensional news story about news itself. But where was the coverage? Big story number 1. Unbeknownst to most people in these communities, they no longer have a local daily paper. Control over everything from news content to price now belongs to bean-counting strangers at Gannett headquarters hundreds of miles away. Big story number 2. More fundamentally, control has moved from journalists to bankers. Gannett is owned by SoftBank, a Japanese hedge fund that has rapaciously looted American newsrooms to grab extravagant fees, salaries, and profits for its rich financial hucksters. Big story number 3. The workaday hometown reporters, photographers, and others who actually produced Gannett's papers are making a gutsy stand against the profiteer, not just for themselves, but for the essential ideals of journalistic integrity and grassroots democracy. Biggest story of all. Gannett's 200 papers cravenly joined in a concerted blanket cover-up of this story, stiffing the public they're supposed to serve and disrespecting the ethical stand of their own employees. Even Gannett's flagship paper, USA Today, which regularly reports on other labor actions, took a dive on covering the journalistic malfeasance of its own overseer. This is Jim Hightower saying, to fight hedge fund corporatization of journalism, go to newsguild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the folks over at the Center for American Progress are launching what we talked about at the beginning. This hey, look at what the Biden administration is doing. Look at what that infrastructure bill is doing in your community. Now, I would have liked it to be a lot more, flashy, like a big giant Joe Biden with his finger pointing, going, "I did that," And then inside of it, you find all the little things, like I said earlier. But, you got to get the information out there. And as I said, I think what Josh Shapiro is doing here in Pennsylvania, putting a camera on that bridge being rebuilt, really important stuff. But here to share some thoughts on, where we are, where we're going, and how the economy's doing, I've asked our good friend Christian Weller to come talk with us. Christian is a senior fellow there at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. He's also a professor of public policy at the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston. Christian, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Rick.
So I got to give you guys credit over at the Center for American Progress. I've been saying, compile this information, make sure it's available, if not for just for people like me to go, hey, this is all this information right at our fingertips. The number of jobs, the investments, communities, all that stuff I think is really fabulous.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, you can go to the website, and I think it's 25,000 different web job sites that people can search in their local communities. And I think it's very important to like I'm an economist, and I look at sort of the big numbers and saying it's $1 trillion we're spending on infrastructure. That's meaningless. It's a big number. We're spending lots of money. But I think what matters to people is, are they fixing the potholes, or is it a rickety bridge that I'm commuting over going to be fixed? Is the rail line that I'm using no longer going to catch on fire? So that's the stuff that matters. And I think putting that information out there and localizing it is critical. Whether we need the flashy, Joe Biden sign that says, I did this, I think we're in the nonpartisan think tank, so we couldn't really do that. But our goal here is put the information out there, localize that, show what government actually does. When it spends money, it does good things in your community. It makes life easier, safer. We no longer have bridge collapsing. We no longer have train tracks catching on fire, which seems to be a daily occurrence in the greater Boston area where I live. So that's sort of the stuff that matters to people.
No, and this is where the good government stuff happens. I mean, I've got friends, and I know you're purely nonpartisan, but I look at my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, and it's all government can't do anything, shouldn't do anything, we won't let them do anything. And then when things go wrong, they go, why didn't government do anything? I mean, it just seems twisted.
Well, that's the shame, right? Infrastructure was always sort of the bipartisan common ground that everybody agreed that this is what government can do and should do because it is the only entity that can take the long risk. There is no private company that steps up and says, I'm going to fix the bridge in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is even sort of, you could imagine possibly a private company coming in, but in rural Pennsylvania and rural Massachusetts, there aren't private companies coming in because the economics don't make sense. But this is where people live. And government is the only entity that can undertake those things and invest for the longer term to make sure that we have safe roads and bridges and canals and rail.
And for me, it's the jobs that come out of this. I mean, one of the things about this tracker that you guys are doing is pointing out the employment that's coming out of this and the job numbers and the reverberation effect through the local economies. And, the good stuff that comes out of infrastructure spending is, we get this new bridge and we get this new road. But the good stuff, too, is we get to support communities with local building trades and people put food on the table for the kids and roof over their heads and all of that stuff. That, to me, is just as important.
Well, then there's two factors here, right? We only measure typically the jobs that are created when we build the bridges and when we repair the roads, the construction jobs, the manufacturing jobs that come directly out of it. But what it also means is that people get to stay in their communities, that it is easier for businesses to do business in local communities and hire people there. They don't have to relocate to the big cities where there is better infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think we often overlook sort of these follow-on effects that these maintaining infrastructure. And it goes really from the roads to bridges now with the massive investments in broadband across the country. It will allow people and businesses to stay where they are and where they want to be because that's where their friends and their families are. That's where their communities are. And that will create job stability for the long term. And we sort of forget that this is sort of very long-term follow-on effect from these investments.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's another reason that I'm a big supporter of prevailing wage, to make sure that those jobs are kept local and that you don't have transients coming through doing shoddy work. It's just one of those things. But the reason I had you come on, and we see the inflation numbers. All we hear about is inflation. I saw the Fed the other day is holding on interest rates. There was some talk maybe they were going to raise it, but they said they may still down the road. We're going to expect more. Where do you think we are right now? I mean, inflation seems to be on everyone's mind. We're fed, this is the worst ever, and it's all Joe Biden's fault. Where are we at this moment, and are we doing the right things, I guess, through federal policy and through the Federal Reserve?
Well, let's see where we are. We have come down from an annual rate of inflation of 9.1% last year to about 4%. 4% is still high, but most of that, or a huge chunk of that, is concentrated in the housing market. And all indications are that we will see continued decline in inflation in the housing market and moderation there. That doesn't mean housing prices or rents are going to come down, but they're going to moderate to normal levels from all we see. Like the reason why we do this is, why we think this as economists, is when you look at the indexes that Zillow points out for new leases, they have the new leases, the increases in new leases have been declining very sharply, more sharply than average rents, and so the new leases tend to lead what's happening to average rents, and so we generally expect inflation to continue coming down, especially as the housing market settles down to more normal levels post-pandemic. And in that world, the question is, has the Federal Reserve done enough? Has it done too much? I'm sort of, and here I really can speak only for myself. I think the Federal Reserve really needs to tread very carefully and possibly hold for longer than just 1 month, as it said. Because one thing is, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates now by 5 percentage points from 0 to 5% since last March. But it takes 6 to 12 months before you feel the effects of this. So a lot of what the Fed has done hasn't made its way through the economy. And we expect the economy to continue slowing down. How much is a different question. But I think at this point we have enough room on the inflation side for the Federal Reserve to say, like, let's wait and see. There is enough risks in the economy from higher interest rates, some of the banking failures and banking troubles that we have, that the Federal Reserve is at risk of overdoing it. Right. And so I would argue that, and many other economists are too, that now is a time to pause, not just for 1 month, but for multiple months, and see what's happening.
Clearly, you're the expert here. I mean, I look at it and I go, just from a layman's view, I think too aggressive, too fast, too much, too soon kind of thing. And as you said, we still don't know what they've done yet. So I'm concerned of us going the other way, of things getting, things.
Right, and it's like, when it comes to Federal Reserve policy, it's an asymmetric thing, right? Like, the economy sort of, like, they can be really good at slowing the economy, but cutting interest rates doesn't have the same effect on the other side. So if the economy tanks, we then have to go to Congress and say, please spend more money, and this Congress is not going to spend more money. With that in mind, with the political risks in mind, I think the Federal Reserve definitely has to go very slowly. Now, one thing that has surprised, I think, a lot of us as economists is how strong the economy actually is, like, at least in the labor market numbers. And that's sort of another point. The economy is really strong. We continue to add around 250, 300,000 jobs every month, even in a world of higher interest rates, even in a world of massive political uncertainty, where the Republicans in Congress are holding the Federal Reserve, the federal government's ability to pay its bills hostage to their political whims. Even in that environment, surprisingly, the economy has done very well, and inflation has come down. Imagine what we could do if the Federal Reserve sort of took off the foot off the brakes a little bit. Economic growth would be a little stronger. We would add more jobs, like, in terms of helping, especially building a strong, resilient middle class. I think we would be in a completely different world.
Let me ask you this, as an economist, because I hear my Republican friends all the time saying, we need to cut spending. We're spending too much. We got a spending problem, Christian. You know it. We got a spending problem. All these infrastructure investments, spending problem. All the investments we're going to make in taking on climate change. Can't have that. It's bad. It's wasteful spending. What happens if we pull all that spending back? I mean, because I have some friends who think, federal government should stop spending entirely. What happens to the economy if that happens?
The economy would tank. But the main thing is, like, most of the new spending was paid for either through tax increases or by clawing back some of the pandemic spending that wasn't spent. But the other part is, like, let's talk about climate risks, for instance. Greening our economy, making our cities and roads and our economy more resilient to climate change. I mean, I live in the greater Boston area, right? We want to protect Boston, and I live close to the water. We want to protect our cities and towns from rising floodwaters. If we don't do that, we're going to be left with enormous costs when the floodwaters come, when the hurricanes hit the East Coast. And increasingly, they're hitting the Northeast. They don't stay in the Southeast. So, like, it's very short-sighted to say, like, we shouldn't be investing in that. It is an upfront investment into our immediate future, into the future of our kids. If we green our economy and we make our economy more resilient to climate change, those are necessary investments, and they will save us tons of money down the road.
No, and it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, even my kids, when they were small, like, Dad, how come every building doesn't have solar panels on it? How come our house does, but none of the other neighbors do? And I'm going, because we just haven't prioritized it in this country. I mean, we need to have that kind of, that Manhattan Project kind of thinking if we're going to solve climate problems down the road, or even if we just want to create, cheap, reliable energy.
Right, and I think it's not just the Investment Act, but also the Inflation Reduction Act that sort of has this open-ended promise of providing tons of tax credits for people who want to install solar credits, who want to buy an electrical vehicle, and helping us green the economy. And generally, I think most economists think that a lot of the spending is actually transformational. It happens through a tax code, but it's going to have a massive impact. And the other part is also what the pandemic taught us: we have to be more independent from suppliers elsewhere. So a lot of manufacturing is coming back, and we now see a manufacturing construction boom that we hadn't seen in decades. So there is lots of good stuff happening, and it's it is backed by government spending, by these promises towards greening the economy, making the economy more resilient.
No, it's all good stuff in my view. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Christian Weller. He's a senior fellow over at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, the website. He's also a professor of public policy at the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. On this front, on the whole greening of the economy, the new jobs, I saw a thing the other day that said solar production is going to, increase from, like 500,000 new jobs, like 4 million new jobs in the next, 5 or 6 years. I mean, the numbers, the projections are enormous. And
like we're starting from such a low base, right? And so part of it, like the growth rate is going to be top, but it has to work on all sides. You have to make sure from a government side that there is sort of the demand is there, that we're going to support it, we're going to have the infrastructure for it there. But at the local level, you got to make sure that you train people in the trade schools and the vocational schools to install solar panels, which is often a shortfall in our educational system, that we don't pay attention to. We don't think holistically about what needs to happen, what will happen. These things are necessary, and I think this needs to work at all levels of government, and part of our very decentralized federal system, part of the problem is that is often not coordinated. But I think increasingly everybody is getting on board that you look at solar panels, wind power, all of that, and it happens in red states and blue states everywhere, that these investments are happening and are necessary, and they're very profitable and very desirable.
Which brings us back to kind of where we started, in that your organization is putting forth a tracker of all the projects that are going on through the infrastructure bill. Is there something like this on the solar array front? On the, hey, we're building energy in a new renewable way, and hey, you can take a see. I think what Shapiro's doing here in Pennsylvania with the cameras, and you can actually see it happening, I think is incredible. Anything like that you see on the horizon or being done?
You mean in terms of the investments?
Yeah, building the solar panels, all of that.
Yeah, the Obama administration tried to do that with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and had actually very good ideas in sort of like the financial industry. I once talked to some very conservative financiers in Georgia, and they thought this was like, they hated Obama, but they thought that was sort of really good stuff. Unfortunately, the Tea Party got wind of it and sort of killed the whole investments and support for solar. Now, a lot of this stuff is happening anyway. You look, like, I was just in Arizona a few months ago, and there is wind panels, there is windmills and solar panels all over southern Arizona, and
there should be.
As there should be. There's lots of land, lots of sun. It helps. It makes sense.
It's a freaking desert.
And the part of it is also the combination between wind and sun is very predictable and generates predictable revenue. So it's like a very nice little savings account for the investors, right? So you get a guaranteed 5% rate of return because you know this stuff always happens. The sun always shines and the wind always blows. So I think it made sense on all fronts, from the investment perspective, from the building, from the construction, from the greening the economy perspective. And the government can do a lot to accelerate it, and that's sort of where the Biden administration has put it. Mark it down with the Inflation Reduction Act, helping households get in on it, more solar panels, heat pumps, and electrical vehicles are sort of the big ones in the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah. Again, that comes through the tax code, and they're very progressive, so the lower income you are, the more benefits you get from the federal government for investing in your own future.
Yeah, it's still amazing. There was a story not too long ago of, if it gets really hot in Tempe or in Phoenix, and people have to use their air conditioning, and we have a brownout, X amount of people are going to go to the emergency room. I'm going, yeah, this is probably why you should increase energy production, help your grid by, I don't know, putting a roof over your state and collecting all that sunlight and maybe turning it into energy that would help you produce that air conditioning.
It's collecting energy, but then there is the grid structure. That's sort of where I think the federal government can invest more money, and that's where the infrastructure investment comes in.
There is a lot of things we can do other than throw up our hands and go, I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, we are doing that. I mean, that's the point, right? This is the point of our conversation. We are within the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. We are actually doing a lot of stuff, and you see it in the numbers, and you see it around the country, and you will see more of this over the coming years of all the good stuff that's happening.
It's just not fast enough in our McDonald's. We need everything in a neat little bag out the window as we're driving past kind of society. But I'm glad that you've come and shared some of it with us. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again as this continues.
Anytime.
And it will. But Christian, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Anytime. Thank you for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. Christian Weller, senior fellow there at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do, and also their tracker. I'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk. Complex in Los Angeles. It was part of SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign in LA. The janitors had gone out on strike against international service systems. The strike had started on May 30th, and despite promises that they would not interfere with the protest, the LAPD showed up wielding batons. They demanded the janitors immediately vacate the premises. But instead of dispersing, the protesters linked arms, and in a show of solidarity, they marched toward the 150 police dressed in riot gear. Police responded by savagely beating protesters, clubbing people on the ground as they tried to stand back up. One demonstrator, who was 3 months pregnant, suffered a miscarriage caused by the police beating. The media recorded the brutal attack. Coverage spurred outrage at the actions of the police that day. It also made the janitors more determined than ever to win a contract. Public pressure resulted in a new contract with a $2 an hour raise for the janitors. They also won family health care coverage. SEIU filed suit over the police conduct, and 3 years later, the LA City Council awarded the union more than $2.3 million. But the police did not have to admit guilt for the attack. 200 janitors gathered on the steps of City Hall to await the settlement decision. Joel Vasquez, one of the janitors who was beaten on that day, addressed the crowd saying, "The people who are supposed to protect us didn't. They beat us." Today has become a day of commemoration of the janitors' struggle. In 2001, janitors gathered in LA to remember that past victory and rally for economic justice. One marcher carried a sign that read, "What's dignity? New shoes for my daughter, a birthday party for my son."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Show. Check out our website, ricksmithshow.com. So, evidently on June 24th in North Carolina, there's going to be a big speech by Kamala Harris to mark the anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. This is, you got to get Kamala out there and more visible as the election comes near. Got to make her look a little bit more presidential. And look, it's campaign season. So this Saturday, the president's going to be in Philadelphia accepting the AFL-CIO's endorsement. Philadelphia, interesting time to be going to Philly when the bridges collapse. And I've had a couple of people go, "How do you think he's going to get here?" I'm going, well, I got to think helicopter, because I don't think they're going to be trust me when I say this. If they come in with a giant motorcade that has to go over I-95 or anywhere near where that bridge is collapsed, the people of Philadelphia will remember. So don't do it. Do not do it. Now here's the other thing. We're in the middle of June. That means Supreme Court. There's a lot of cases that are. We'll see. I guess that's the best way to put it. There are a lot of cases that we'll see. I've been holding my breath because there are still 21 cases yet to trickle down to the rest of us. There are 4 big ones. There's the affirmative action and the student loan one. Those are going to affect people in a big way. There's the LGBT rights one and the freedom of speech one that's going on, and there's also the state legislative theory one, the one from North Carolina, the big voting case. It's going to be interesting to see where this takes us. What these Supreme Court justices that, have made some interesting decisions. And, as you've heard me say before, my fear is they take us back to a time that most of us can't fathom. And as a working person, I look at the working class cases that I know are in the pipeline, ready to be decided in the years to come. And it's going to take us back to days where, we had a guy a little bit ago say he's an anarcho-capitalist, and that idea of anarchy and capitalism, that the capitalist system is, that's what's going to thrive. That's where they're taking us to, where the Bezoses of the world, where the wealth class of the world, where if they don't want to give it, not a big deal. I say they're taking us back to the days of the Lochner era, where if you were hungry enough and desperate enough to work in poverty wages for desperation wages, that's your choice. It's your liberty. That whole idea of liberty of contract that we lived under for about 40 years. The idea that back then you couldn't pass any law to pass minimum wage or maximum hour laws or any infringement on the employer-employee relationship, which in my state of Pennsylvania in their workers' comp law still refers to the master-servant relationship being the employer and the employee. So there's a lot of concern, in my view, of what our Supreme Court is going to do to us. That's why elections have consequences. But I want to hear your thoughts. Missed any of today's program? Something I said got on your nerves, under your skin? Want to weigh in? Rick at thericksmithshow.com. That's where you send those emails. Hate goes to the top. I got to answer that first. even if it is, 2 words. Make sure you grab the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. You will find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where we're